Hi, welcome to Global Village TV. At Global Village TV, we engage our viewers with some of the day-to-day issues affecting the global village. We stand up against human rights abuses, social injustice, environmental pollution, child abuse, abject poverty, and many more. We have something for viewers of all ages, children, the youth, adults, young and old. So stay tuned in and don't go anywhere.
Hello, my name is Michelle Ward from Brook Language Services, and I'm here with Dr Peprah Gyamfi.
Hello.
You are a doctor, an evangelist preacher and an author, a prolific author if I might say. Roughly how many books have you written?
I've lost count of them, but at least 50 books.
I'm sure it's a lot more than 50, but what made you start writing in the first place?
Yeah, okay, the inspiration to write came very early on when I was about 13, 14 years old. I suffered an ailment to my left ankle which forced me to stop going to school. And in order to occupy myself, I got hold of a book called The Coral Island. So I read the book, and then eventually I decided also to try my hand at writing. My first ever book was called The Bitter Struggle. The Bitter Struggle. It was a way of me coming to terms with the matrilineal type of inheritance that is practiced by the Akan population group, of which I'm a member. And one of my friends, his father passed away at the time when I was having the problem in my leg. And in line with this inheritance system, he and his mother were left empty. And the family, the brothers and sisters of the deceased took over all the property. So I was very upset about that experience of my friend. So I sat down to write a fictitious book about a young boy whose parents died and he was left without anything. But for lack of material, I couldn't finish that book.
But you alluded to your disability with your leg, and you've written your book Disability Nightmare. And because of that, you are setting up the Good Shepherd Home for the Disabled, and proceeds from all your books will be going towards this project of yours. Can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Yeah, the project is, but the aim is to provide decent accommodation for the disabled people of Ghana. At the moment, there's hardly any home for the disabled, and a lot of them are living on the streets or living with their relatives in very crowded accommodation. So the aim of this project is to provide, as I said, decent housing for the disabled of Ghana.
And the list of the books that you've published so far can be found on the website, along with details of the Good Shepherd Home project that we're setting up here. Are your books mainly self-help books, or are they religious books or history books? What sort of books are they?
I've written about several various themes and topics. So you can classify them as Christian, about my own Christian journey. I became a Christian in 1978 in Ghana. So and some of the books are about my Christian experiences. And then as a doctor, I've also written health education books. And of course, growing up in a little village, and for my journey from Ghana to Nigeria, growing up in the poor environments of my country, Ghana, and then getting to use the West. So I have a lot of themes to write about. So it's about socioeconomic issues, poverty and wealth, the conflict between poverty and wealth, the poverty of those in Ghana, and the wealth. But I must say that wealth does not bring all the happiness that some people think. So these are some of the themes I'm writing about.
So, Dr. Robert, you've decided to set up your book club, and a free copy of one of these 10 books that we are going to discuss in a moment, a free copy of one of the books of your choice will be sent to you for a minimum donation of £10, which will all go towards the Good Shepherd Home for the Disabled. So we're going to discuss very briefly these 10 books. Don't forget, you can get a free copy for the donation of £10. So let's start with a book called The Call That Changed My Life.
Yeah, the call that changed my life is the first book that I wrote. It's about the story of how I grew up in my little village, and as I said, my parents were not going to church. So though I believe in God, I didn't have that connection until one day one of my friends came to preach about the message of salvation, and I gave my life to the Lord Jesus Christ. And the experiences that I got that inspired me to write this book, and through the Lord's leading, I managed to make it all the way from my little village in Pitimpi to medical school in Germany. So it's a testimony about how the Lord called me and what the Lord has done for me so far.
Thank you. So that's the book, The Call That Changed My Life. Now we're going to move on to growing up in a small African village, the story of an African village.
Yeah.
And what's that book about?
Yes, okay. So I set out to write about my little village in Pitimpi where I grew up. So I narrate what we were doing as children, how we went to school, how you help our parents day-to-day life in the village, how you help them on the fields, and I also talk about social life in the village. For example, when married people got into conflict, they didn't go to court. There was a traditional way of settling such issues, and also community work for the whole family population. There was also a football team, and sometimes one side of the village would play against the other. So it's a day-to-day life in my little village that I grew up. Very, very exciting stories that I've narrated.
That sounds lovely and so full of colour about Ghana, which I think will appeal to a lot of people. So that is the story of an African village. And now one that sounds a little bit sad, A Letter to My Dying Mother.
Yeah, the inspiration to write that book came when when I went to Germany. My plan was to invite my mother to come and see things for herself. The big difference between life in the little village and that in the West. But unfortunately, I didn't have the financial means to invite her, and eventually I heard that she was so ill that she was likely she was going to pass away. That was 1994. So as a way of just coming to terms with the situation, I decided to write a fictitious letter to be sent to a fictitious person who was going to Ghana at that time to narrate to her all that she would have experienced had she managed to make it to the West. So that is the story, A Letter to My Dying Mother. I tell her about how, for example, in our society, my mother was so open, going from village to house all the time to talk to other people. I told her that if she had visited me in Germany, it would not be possible for her to do that. You always have to call the person to arrange to visit and all these things, and also the weather. I told her that it was so cold here. If she had managed to come here, even if I had invited her, I would have done so in summer because it was so cold she couldn't have made it. So these are the day-to-day comparing the situation in our little village and that of the sophisticated West.
I think that sounds absolutely fascinating, the contrast between the two cultures. And what a lovely thought, writing a letter. And I think a lot of us who've lost a parent is something that maybe we could do. So that's A Letter to My Dying Mother. And there's such a wide range of books that you've written. The next one is Say No to Substances of Addiction.
Yes, as part of my job, my work, particularly in the UK, when I moved to Germany, to the UK, I was doing locum. I was not working in a hospital setting because I needed the flexibility to keep on writing. So I work as a locum doctor, and I was being sent from place to place. And eventually I ended up working mostly in prisons. That is where I saw the misery that drug addiction can cause. Mm-hmm. So, because it's a big issue, that is, it will take a different team altogether. So, based on the experience that I had with these drug addicts who have to steal to find their addiction, I just wrote this book as a warning especially to the youth, to stay away from drugs.
What a varied experience you've had. So that is Say No to Substances of Addiction. 3 cheers for Ghana. I'm sure we could all say that. Beautiful country, but you've written about that as well.
Yeah, okay, 3 cheers for Ghana. You know, between 1994, when I went to my mother's funeral, and 2007, a period of 13 years, I had not been in Ghana. And during that time, they went through economic reforms and open economy, and it saw a lot of developments going on. So when I went after 30 years, I couldn't even recognize Accra. It has expanded so massively. And there was pre-election, democracy was functioning very well. So I wrote that book just to recognize the achievement that has been made over the years in Ghana.
3 cheers for Ghana.
3 cheers for Ghana.
Brilliant. And you're touching on the differences that had occurred in your lifetime. So another book is My Secondary School Day.
Yes, that is also meant especially for secondary school children, not only in Ghana, but it's a way of also comparing and contrasting secondary school education. I went to a boarding school from the village. The simple village boy who didn't even know how to use the toothpaste. So I went to secondary school, and I was taught how to use the toothpaste, how to put on a tie, a lot of new things that I experienced in the boarding school. That is what this book is about.
And as you said, it's previously in a book that's like a little boy coming from a little village in the middle of nowhere to going to the equivalent of Eton. It is quite a contrast.
Yeah, it's quite a
contrast. So I think that would be a really interesting book to read. And don't forget that you will get a free copy of one of these books of your choice for a minimum of £10 donation to the Good Shepherd Homes for the Disabled.
Yeah.
Now this one intrigues me. Twins Divided.
Yes, Twins Divided is a story of Ghana that at that time is called Gold Coast. The Gold Coast path to independence. It all happened after the Second World War. So the struggle for independence from England. It was the English colony. So there were two factions. One faction wanted it the slow way, and the other faction led by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. I don't know whether we have heard about him. He was he wanted the independence now. So there was a conflict between the two factions. But eventually, Nkrumah's side won, and Ghana was independent. The first African country south of the Sahara to get independence. So this book, I wrote it to mark the 60th anniversary of Ghana's independence. So that is what it's about.
So not twins as in people, but twin countries. So twins divided.
Yeah, two political factions. Yeah, two political factions.
And you mentioned World War II, and that's the title of another of your books, World War II Revisited.
Yeah, well, it's a real story of that I heard from my own father. During the World War II, West African soldiers were conscripted to fight for the Commonwealth in Burma. And my father was telling me that during those days he had to run away from home because they were being forcibly conscripted. And there was one elderly person in our village who went to war and came back almost disabled mentally, and nobody was taking care of him. So based on that story, and I reading about the history of the role played by West African troops in Burma, I wrote this historical fiction. So that is a more historical fiction about, but in reality it happened, but the actors are fictitious.
Okay, so like a lot of your books, there's the basis of truth, the facts, and you've written your own version, your own take on it,
Yes.
which is still of interest to people. So
Yes.
that's World War II Revisited.
Yeah.
Diary of a Baby. Now that is written from such an interesting angle. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, Diary of a Baby is where I give a baby born under the very, very, very deprived conditions of my native village in Pintimpi, the boys, to talk about his difficult journey through the birth canal. They came to the world, the temperature was so hot, and everything so loud, and she was wondering where I landed, and a lot of faces, everybody coming to look at him, and she was so fascinated about it. I was surprised. So that's the account of his life on earth, all the experience that he made in the first 4 years of his life. Very, very exciting book. Very, very interesting to read.
Very good book, and I say such a different angle. Very, very worth reading. Right, book number 8, Disability Nightmare. So that is based on your own story.
Yeah, it's also based on my own story. As I said, that is even what has motivated me to come up with this Good Shepherd Homes for the Disabled. Because I also had my own disability, but thank God I was able to overcome it and continue to school. But continued my education. But over a period of 2 years, I stayed out of school, and eventually I regained my health. But I do ask myself, what would have happened if I had not made it? And thinking of those who could not make it, those who are disabled in Ghana and elsewhere, I decided to narrate my story, and through it raise awareness, and through it eventually win funds for my project.
So Disability Nightmare, the book, is based upon your own experiences, and you're wanting to raise the profile of the disabled in Ghana, and that's what the proceeds from all these books will be going towards the Good Shepherd Home for the disabled. As I said earlier, and you will get a free copy of the book for a minimum donation of £10. And information on all of this is on your website, yes. www.peprahgyamfi.org. Right, moving on to book number 9 is actually a series of books. Kiddie Books series.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
What are these books?
That is those who are listening, parents and grandparents, is books for kids. You can get copies for your children. So I thought it's important to tell the world, especially the Western children, how kids elsewhere in Ghana grew up, the experiences. Growing up without toys, they have to improvise their own toys. Growing up without electricity, without running water, having to help their parents do the daily chores and all these things. So that is what inspired me. I'm using one boy, Kofi Mensah. Kofi Mensah is growing up in a little village called Cocoa Krum. Cocoa means cocoa, and Krum is settlement. So it's a settlement, cocoa settlement, and it shows that actually the residents were cocoa farmers. That was the main thing they were doing. And whereas Kofi was helping his parents grow cocoa, he was not aware that chocolate was made out of cocoa, and he had even not tasted chocolate. So one day, the agent who buys the cocoa spoke to him about how tasty chocolate was. So he promised to bring chocolate to Kofi in the little village. So that is the Kiddie book series. There are 25 books. There are about 7 of them have already been published, and more are to follow.
And they're all a very basic level of English, so they're suitable for young children. But they're about the history of growing up in the 60s in Ghana. So full of interest, beautifully illustrated, all with a moral tale. So that's a Kiddie Books series. And your 10th choice of book is Radical Surgery for an African Lookalike.
Yes, that is about to be published. In it, it's also fictitious. There are a lot of books coming up in the series. I'm a doctor in it, and I'm going to visit my patients at home, and I get to a settlement, and I get a puncture. And so the villagers, they were so thin and bony. And one thing I noticed was that the heads of the citizens had the shapes of African countries. Like some of the boys looked at Ghana or the head, some of Nigeria, and they told me that their grandmother was in bed. So when they realized I was a doctor, they invited me to come home to their grandmother. And the grandmother also happened to be having the shape of African map. So Grandma Africa. She was so emaciated and so terribly ill. So the children asked me whether I could do something to help Grandmother Africa, who looks like Africa. So I assumed the role as a doctor. So I took the history of the grandma and I examined the grandma, and then so I offered solutions to her problems. So that is this book. It will be published very soon, not yet published, but it will be long.
So that's Radical Surgery for an African Lookalike.
Yeah.
So that's 10 books we've discussed very, very briefly, all of which are different topics, very, very interesting. And as saying, get a free copy for a minimum donation of £10, which will be going towards the Good Shepherd homes. Can you just very briefly again remind people what the homes are going to be for?
The homes are going to be for the disabled, physically, mentally disabled, adults and children. It depends on how much support you have, but we are starting first with 20 units of burdens providing at least 20 places for 20 individuals with disability. I am an optimist, so I know that I'm hoping that we get more support, that we expand it, not only to Ghana, but eventually to Africa because it's the same problem everywhere because of the economic hardships. Even the physically, those who are physically okay are struggling to make ends meet. So what about the disabled? That is where we want to come in to help them. So any book that you buy, you are not only buying for the sake of reading it, you are buying to help a good cause.
So that's the Good Shepherd Home for the Disabled. So if you want any information on this, you can help with sponsorship anyway, or you wish to volunteer either funds or materials, or even your own free time. Perhaps you could go and help out there in Accra, Ghana. Please take a look at the website www.peprahgyamfi.org or send him an email and we can find out more and look after these disabled people in Ghana. Thank you so much, Dr. Robert.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to Global Village TV. At Global Village TV, we engage our viewers with some of the day-to-day issues affecting the global village. We stand up against human rights abuses, social injustice, environmental pollution, child abuse, abject poverty, and many more. We have something for viewers of all ages, children, the youth, adults, young and old. So stay tuned in and don't go anywhere.